We expect our world to be, basically this frictionless, algorithmically perfect feed.
Mhm.
You swipe your finger, the screen glides perfectly, and the app hands you exactly what you want to see before you even know you want it. There's just zero resistance.
Mhm.
So, why are elite athletes starving themselves to the absolute brink of organ failure just to get locked inside a cage? Or why are millions of people spending their weekends ripping the computerized brains out of classic cars just to make them louder, heavier, and significantly harder to drive?
Well, I mean, it is a massive societal rebellion when our daily environment becomes entirely synthetic-like, optimized for total convenience. Human nature actively seeks out brutality.
Yeah?
We inherently crave visceral reality,
Uh,
environments where our actions actually have immediate physical consequences and where pain is an actual metric of progress.
and that paradox is exactly what we are diving into today for you. Our source material for this deep dive is a really sprawling, multi-hour conversation from the Joe Rogan Experience featuring Brendan Schaub.
It's a fascinating one.
It really is. We're going to map out the connections between the multi-billion-dollar math of modern combat sports, the psychological mechanics of algorithmic paranoia, and the extreme lengths people are going to in analog car culture just to feel something real.
The through line here really is friction. As the modern world attempts to completely eliminate friction from our daily lives, we're watching humans manufacture their own extreme versions of it just to, maintain their sanity.
Right, and speaking of extreme friction, let's look at MMA. Even by the brutal standards of MMA weight cuts, what someone like Khamzat Chimaev put his body through, it defies basic biology.
Oh, absolutely.
We aren't just talking about a tough sauna session to drop a few pounds here. This guy was walking around north of 230 pounds, right? Packing on incredibly dense muscle, lifting heavy, and then he had to drop down to 185 pounds to fight.
Dropping 45 pounds when an athlete already possesses single-digit body fat? I mean, that requires pushing the human organism into a state of acute manufactured crisis.
It's insane.
It is. When a regular person loses weight, their body burns adipose tissue, fat reserves, basically. But a finely tuned athlete, they lack those reserves.
Right.
So once the surface sweat is gone, the body literally turns on its own structure to survive.
Because muscle tissue is what? Primarily water?
Exactly. To hit that 185-pound limit, his body had to start cannibalizing its own muscle mass just to access the hydration trapped inside the cells. You are systematically draining the fluid out of your own internal organs.
Oh, that sounds awful.
The biological mechanism is glycogen depletion. When you starve the muscles of carbohydrates, they release the intracellular water they hold. During Chimaev's weight cut, his body was essentially entering organ failure the day before the fight.
Wait, actual organ failure.
Yeah. They had to pause his weight cut for an hour because his biological systems were quite literally shutting down. You force a machine into critical failure mode.
And then ask it to perform explosive life or death movements 24 hours later.
Exactly.
It's like taking a high-performance race car engine, draining every single drop of oil out of it, and expecting it to win the Daytona 500.
Right.
I mean, it might weigh slightly less on the scale, but the internal friction is going to tear the block apart from the inside out.
Yeah.
You are begging for a catastrophic blowout.
Mm-hmm.
And that compromised biology kind of sets the stage for the psychological anomaly of someone like Sean Strickland.
Oh, Strickland is the perfect counterweight to Chimaev's genetic and physical peak.
Yeah, he is.
When they fought, and Strickland actually secured the win, he did it almost entirely through sheer, unadulterated grit. He didn't rely on blazing fast sprint times or, a pristine wrestling pedigree. He stepped into the cage with his right arm severely compromised from a recent dirt bike crash.
He couldn't even use his shoulder properly.
No, not at all.
A structural injury like that, I mean, that forces 99% of athletes to pull out of a high-stakes bout. You don't fight a killer like Chimaev with one good arm.
But Strickland absorbed the early damage when Chimaev was at his absolute most dangerous and fresh. He just kind of dragged him into deep, exhausting waters.
Yeah.
Strickland is a guy who grew up completely disenfranchised with a highly abusive background. He weaponized his own endurance. He utilized his lifetime of friction to outlast an opponent who was biologically compromised by the weight cut.
Okay, but wait. If poverty and a lifetime of trauma create the ultimate fighter, how do we explain Arman Sarukian?
Right, that's the anomaly.
He completely breaks the archetype. This is a guy with a billionaire father. He flies into Los Angeles, rents Lamborghinis, lives in pure luxury, and then steps into the octagon with the ferocity of a starving street brawler.
It's wild. He dominates elite wrestlers and generates massive money entirely on his own merit. Sarukian really proves that the drive for physical dominance isn't exclusively a byproduct of financial desperation.
Mm-hmm.
For some individuals, that violent competitive drive, that absolute need to inflict and absorb damage, it's just hardwired into their DNA.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot be pacified by a trust fund or a comfortable life.
But whether a fighter comes from extreme poverty or a billionaire family, their physical sacrifice fuels a corporate machine that operates on a totally different set of rules.
Oh, cool.
Under the TKO and Paramount umbrella, the UFC is currently valued at roughly $7.7 billion.
It's a staggering valuation. It's built on the backs of athletes who, according to the financial breakdowns discussed in the sources, receive approximately 18% of the total revenue.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Is that 18% revenue split actually an injustice to the fighters? Or is it just the cold, harsh math required to keep a massive combat sports promotion alive? I mean, every single competitor, PFL, Bellator, Affliction back in the day, they either bleed cash for years or completely fold.
Right.
The UFC is a monopoly, basically, because they are the only ones who figured out the profitability puzzle.
And that profitability puzzle relies on massive volume, not just occasional star power. To satisfy their lucrative broadcast deals and sustain that $7.7 billion valuation, the UFC has to put on roughly 45 live fight cards a year.
Which is almost one every week.
Exactly. They built an industrial entertainment engine that requires a constant, unending influx of human capital.
Which perfectly explains that behind-the-scenes detail about Netflix.
Yes.
Netflix has practically infinite cash, but they completely passed on buying the UFC broadcast rights. They only wanted the massive tentpole superstar pay-per-views.
Mm-hmm.
They had zero interest in broadcasting the grueling weekly fight night schedule.
Because the fight night schedule is an administrative and logistical grind. But those smaller, lesser-known cards are the actual infrastructure of the monopoly.
Right.
The UFC needs that massive roster of entry-level and mid-tier fighters willing to bleed for lower pay on obscure cards just to maintain the constant churn of content that the corporate valuation demands. Without the grueling weekly volume, the billions disappear.
So you have athletes being commodified by the corporation, and now, thanks to the explosion of online sports betting, they are being aggressively commodified by the fans.
It's getting really bad.
The Joaquin Buckley versus Sean Brady fight is a prime example of this toxicity.
Yeah, before that fight even occurred, abnormal betting lines shifted wildly. Buckley went from an underdog to a massive favorite in a matter of hours.
Wow.
The betting activity was so suspicious that the UFC and betting regulators had to intervene and cap limits. They were fearing insider trading regarding a potential undisclosed injury to Brady.
But Brady fought and was totally fine.
He was.
But the sheer accessibility of gambling apps has just mutated the fan culture. You have guys sitting on their couches, losing a $500 parlay bet on their phone, and immediately flooding a fighter's social media with vicious hate and death threats.
The psychological shift there is disturbing. But, I mean, it's entirely predictable. The fan is no longer watching a human being enduring physical trauma for sport.
Right.
They're watching a stock ticker. When the fighter loses, they become a failed investment that costs the viewer money. It strips away all empathy, reducing human blood and neurological damage to a bad financial trade.
That toxic detachment doesn't just stay in sports betting, though.
No.
It is a direct symptom of how our digital environment is fundamentally altering our grip on reality and our trust in the physical world.
The digital infrastructure we interact with daily was, ostensibly designed to connect us, but it actually isolates us into hyper-curated algorithmic feedback loops. It breaks down our shared perception of objective events.
There is staggering polling data on this mentioned in the source material.
Right.
Nearly 30% of Americans believe the recent assassination attempts on Donald Trump were completely staged.
Think about the psychological mechanics required to produce that level of paranoia.
Yeah.
You have a highly documented physical event with real fatalities, real injuries, and live video. But when algorithmic media platforms, particularly TikTok, feed a user an endless repeating loop of niche conspiracy theories, the brain's ability to discern objective reality degrades. The algorithm optimizes for engagement. Paranoia and distrust are incredibly engaging emotions.
It literally rots the brain's critical thinking filter. You are fed a tailored alternate reality until the actual world doesn't make sense anymore. Now, our goal here isn't to take a side on the politics of this, but just to look at the mechanisms being discussed.
Exactly.
And the concern goes way beyond just what we are being fed. It's about how we are being watched. Look at the international landscape, specifically the UK right now.
Right.
You have the rollout of digital credit systems, the push for 15-minute cities that critics argue restrict physical movement, and actual citizens being jailed over their social media posts.
hmm
The smartphone isn't just a communication tool anymore. It is perceived as an invisible net of surveillance.
It creates an atmosphere of profound claustrophobia. The digital realm monitors your behavior, curates your worldview, and limits your physical autonomy. And, ironically, it isolates us even when we are physically surrounded by our peers.
There's this anecdote about a high school bus in Texas that illustrates this so perfectly.
Oh, that was chilling.
A bus packed full of teenagers pulls up to the school in absolute dead silence. Every single kid is staring down at a glowing rectangle, completely disconnected from the living, breathing human being sitting 2 inches away from them.
If we view this behavioral shift through the lens of historical public health, the comparison to the 1960s is striking. Back then, roughly 40 to 45% of adults in the U.S. smoked cigarettes.
Wow, almost half.
Yeah. Society was saturated in a highly addictive substance. You could smoke in hospitals, on airplanes, in restaurants. Eventually, the physical harm became undeniable, and we course-corrected. Many sociologists look at smartphone addiction and hope for a similar societal awakening.
But I mean, you can just put a cigarette down and walk away. You can go cold turkey. You can't just quit the smartphone.
That is the terrifying distinction. You didn't need a pack of Marlboros to check your daily work schedule, or verify your bank balance, or authenticate a two-factor login to pay your mortgage. The digital algorithm is no longer just an addictive substance. It has become the mandatory infrastructure for participating in modern society. To opt out of the digital world is to effectively exile yourself from the economy.
So if you can't realistically opt out, and the digital world is isolating, paranoid, and highly surveilled, it makes total sense why there is this massive cultural pivot toward raw, mechanical, analog experiences.
Absolutely.
People are desperately searching for friction just to feel grounded and alive again.
It's a mechanical rebellion. When the digital environment feels overly synthetic, frictionless, and fake, humans inherently crave machinery that is loud, heavy, and difficult to control.
Look at Brendan Schaub's new show, Gearheads Gone Wild. It's hosted on Tubi, which honestly surprisingly boasts over 100 million active users.
That's a huge audience.
Yeah. That is a massive mainstream audience tuning in specifically to watch people obsess over physical analog car culture.
Because analog cars demand your absolute participation.
Oh.
Take the Gunther Works slant-nose Porsche discussed in the sources.
Oh, that car.
Right. It is a $1.6 million air-cooled carbon fiber masterpiece. And in a straight line, from a rolling start, this analog-style machine completely obliterates a modern, highly computerized Porsche GT3 RS.
Which on paper defies logic.
Yeah.
The GT3 RS has sophisticated computers perfectly calculating every single millisecond of traction, braking, and gear shifting.
But that is exactly the point.
Yeah.
The computerized car does the work for you. It removes the friction.
Mm-hmm.
The analog Porsche requires the driver to manually manage the power delivery, physically feel the mechanical grip limits through the steering column, and execute the shifts.
Yeah.
It is visceral engagement over automated, sterilized perfection.
It's why people are paying absurd premiums for manual transmissions right now. Tremac actually had to custom develop a manual gearbox for the new C8 Corvette because the factory wouldn't build one, and enthusiasts absolutely demanded it.
It wouldn't take no for an answer.
Exactly. It's why older E46 and E92 BMW M3s are skyrocketing in value. You actually have to feel the bite of the clutch.
And certain factions of the car community are pushing that desire for raw feedback to absolute chaotic extremes.
There is this fascinating, almost heretical trend happening right now. Purists hate it, but guys are taking these refined, perfectly balanced, classic European Porsches, ripping the engines out, and swapping in giant American LS V8s.
The mechanics of that engine swap tell you everything you need to know about this cultural rebellion. A European flat-six engine is engineered for smooth, high-revving, balanced power delivery.
Right.
An LS V8 is a pushrod muscle car engine. It has aggressive cam profiles. It produces raw, violent, low-end torque. It physically shakes the entire chassis of the car when it idles.
They are literally spending thousands of dollars on unlocked engine control units, ECUs, just to bypass all the factory safety limiters. They want the machine to be unpredictable.
They are intentionally reintroducing chaos into a highly controlled system. An unlocked ECU gives the driver raw, unfiltered control over the fuel mapping and spark timing. There is no computer intervention saving you if you make a mistake in a corner. the margin for error vanishes, which forces the driver to be entirely hyper-focused in the present physical moment.
But wait, at what point does building a 1,400 horsepower street truck, tuning an unlocked ECU, and worrying about the engine overheating on the way to your kid's baseball game, at what point does that extreme mechanical obsession become just as isolating and disconnected from reality as the digital algorithm we are all trying to escape?
Well, the paradox of obsession is that all extremes lead to isolation. Whether you are scrolling endlessly in a dark room or spending 80 hours a week under the hood of a truck, the extreme edge of any pursuit separates you from general society. But the critical difference lies in the output.
Because the truck is actually there.
Yes, the mechanical obsession yields a tangible physical result. You bust your knuckles on the manifold, you smell the exhaust, you feel the vibration in your chest. It anchors you to physical reality, even if it is a highly stressful and expensive one. The digital obsession anchors you to a phantom.
It's real friction versus the synthetic friction of arguing with a bot on Twitter. Let's pull all of this together for you. We started in the extreme biological devastation of an MMA fighter's 40-pound weight cut. We examined the cold, multi-billion-dollar math of a corporate sports monopoly built on human volume. We walked down the silent, screen-lit aisles of a Texas school bus where reality is dissolving into algorithmic paranoia. And finally, we ended up in the roaring, vibrating seat of a $1 million analog Porsche.
We are really watching humanity navigate the whiplash of a rapidly changing environment. The biological, the financial, the digital, and the mechanical are all colliding as we try to figure out what it actually means to be a human being in the 21st century.
And that leads me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. As a society, we are currently obsessed with building perfect frictionless systems. We want automated, perfectly balanced cars that shift flawlessly for us.
Right.
We want perfectly curated algorithmic feeds that only show us ideas we already agree with. We want our entertainment and our sports instantly optimized for maximum profit with minimum unpredictability.
But human biology, our very evolutionary blueprint, is fundamentally wired for struggle. We are designed to solve problems, endure stress, and overcome physical resistance.
So if we actually succeed in stripping all the friction out of our modern lives, do we end up exactly like those fighters who lose their hunger the exact second they get a multi-million-dollar mansion? If everything is easy, the machine gets weak from lack of use. The bone doesn't break, it just dissolves. So I have to ask you, what is the friction in your life right now that is actually keeping you sharp?
That is a vital question for a frictionless age.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you on the next one.